Okay, welcome back, everyone. We just came back from executive session where we had a meeting with our BOCES representatives for discussing our superintendent search and beginning that process. And so I need a motion to open our public session. Carrie and Diana second. Thank you. All those in favor? Passes 7-0. Okay, so we are open. I would like to ask our student representative to lead us into the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Administrative remarks. Where do we start? So I mixed things up, keeping it fresh. Who'd like to go first?
Good evening, everyone. I would like to comment on two action items this evening, pending board approval. One is an employment contract with Leonore Volpe, who is being appointed to the Provisional Assistant Supervisor of Transportation. And the second is an employment contract with Anthony Chessa, who is being appointed to the head custodian position at Wells. I would like to congratulate Leonore and Anthony. Both of these individuals are longtime employees and deserve these promotions. That concludes my comments.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I have a couple of budget updates, a couple of encouraging budget updates. Just last month, the state released the anticipated contribution rates for the employees' retirement system, which is going to represent a decrease from the current year, and that would be 14.6% of payroll. The current rate is 14.9%, so that represents a rate-to-rate decrease of 2%. So that's encouraging leading into the 19-20 budget year. Also through the first 8 months of the year, the CPI, Consumer Price Index, is trending at a growth rate of about 2.2%, and that has major implications on the tax cap, which we all know is limited to 2% or the change in CPI, whichever is less, and that will likely allow our budget, the allowable growth factor, to be 2% for the 2019-20 school budget. So two items of budget news that's very encouraging leading into our budget development season. An update on the Baseball Tomorrow Fund grant. Our athletic director, Mr. Berardo, has completed the application, which is applying for additional amenities at the baseball and softball field, such as safety netting, bullpens, and batting cages. Hopefully we'll learn whether or not we've been awarded the grant in November. The Brewster residents should soon be receiving, if they haven't already received, a property tax relief credit check from New York State, and that's due to the district's continued compliance with the tax cap. And the reimbursement amounts will vary depending on the household's adjusted gross income. And on our district website, under the business office page, there's a link to the state's website that gives more information on the property tax relief credit. Finally, the audit committee met on Tuesday, October 2nd, to review our internal audit risk assessment and also our external audit report, which is our financial statements. Both will be presented to the board for approval on October 23rd, and we'll also have the financial statement presentation from our outside external auditors, O'Connor Davies, PKF. And that concludes my comments for this evening.
Good evening. I have two updates. The first has to do with the policy committee. We began meeting again this afternoon to address some immediate needs as well as some ongoing policy conversion items. One of the policies that requires prompt attention is policy 0110, sexual harassment of district personnel. So this policy reflects a mandated change in the New York State labor law. It was reviewed by our committee today. What we're going to ask, traditionally we have a first and second read, which is not a legal requirement, only the first read is a legal requirement. So in order to get this on the books, we're going to ask on the October 23rd board agenda to have a separate action item with this one policy as a first and final read. We can only revise it if we need to, but this again was reviewed by our policy committee today and has also been reviewed by legal counsel and meets the mandates for this new law. And some positive news, we finished the remaining Section 5000 policies today, so that is the last piece of our policy conversion. So we'll be sending those policies along for your approval at the next 2 board meetings, and hopefully in December or January, we'll finally have an action item that can change all or convert all of our policies over to a uniform numbering convention. Second has to do with mandates for our English as a new language or ENL students. So at the end of next week, a major report is due, and it's called the Comprehensive ELL Education Plan, or CEP. So you've heard of Part 154 regulations before. Those are the commissioner regulations that outline the mandates that pertain to ENL students. So one specific mandate that is on the books is that we offer a bilingual education program if 20 or more students in the same grade speak the same home language. There are several grades where that is the case, but we do not have a bilingual program. We've taken many steps as a district to try and address that, but it isn't the case. So this will be my 3rd year submitting this application, to the 3rd year that it initially gets kicked back and says that you haven't met these mandates, and then we have to provide a rationale for why that's the case. But what we're hoping is that maybe Karen Bacon and I, Karen is the ENL specialist district-wide, can have some time for the next board meeting or maybe the November board meeting to explain our program and our approach, and to help inform in a little bit more detail the board as to what our requirements are.
Good evening, Board Trustees. As you know, last year we were awarded a grant to participate in the Jason STEM Learning Program, which is a supplement to science instruction, and what comes with it is the option or the availability of our teachers to use the online system free of charge, for a full year, and this would be the year. So they basically access all the curriculum that's provided by Jason. That came to fruition through the board's agreement to allow me to participate in a national STEM consortium of other superintendents. And that's where I learned about Jason. And I also indicated that there was no way that we could afford to participate, which then led to a grant that was a grant application, which was given to me, and I completed it. So that allowed us to use Jason for free. One of the other perks that comes with being part of Jason is the ability for either a teacher or a student to participate in the Jason Argonaut program. And most of us have heard or learned about and forgotten probably about the Greek mythology of the band of explorers called the Argonauts that accompanied Jason on his quest to find the Golden Fleece. And that for a teacher or a student who participates in this, they get an opportunity to travel to research locations around the world to work side by side with scientists and engineers. So this year for us, a teacher is going to be the Argonaut. It is free to us, meaning Peter Lamoureux gets to travel to Silicon Valley in San Francisco next month. He gets to visit Apple, Google, Tesla, Stanford, Obvious Ventures, and a few other places to really focus on design thinking and obviously to encourage, and he had his role, because he has a leadership role as being on top of teaching or providing instruction in physics, to help to create some improvements in the science department at the high school. So this will go a long way with him being able to do that. As I said, it's free. We don't pay for transportation, for registration, for any of those costs. A hotel, all he does is fill out an application which allows them to collect the information that he needs. So all that he has to do is return, of course, and can't stay there. He has to return and share with the board what he learned and how this experience will actually help him to use that in the work that Ms. Gosh explained at our last board meeting, which is to focus on improving and enhancing the science instruction at the secondary level. So that's pretty cool. And the benefactor for this is the New York State Insurance Reciprocal, also known as NYSER. So that was the source of the application. So I'm sure that Peter was very excited for the opportunity. Another piece of good news, this was from Russ Davison of KG&D Architects. JFK, the JFK School additions and the alterations was selected by the local chapter of the American Institute of Architects for a design award. So this is a tremendous honor that's bestowed upon Russ and his team, but also if we happen to be a part of that since it is here in the district. So I'll send you the information on when this ceremony takes place. It'll be in Greenwich on October 25th, so I'll provide some information and hopefully as many of you as possible can attend so that Russ doesn't take all the credit. You did need a site to do this at, right? You may be aware of this through NYSBA or WestPUT, but the Board of Regents was considering using Title I money to boost state participation in the grades 3 through 8 assessments. The Regents decided not to approve that, so there'll be no funds that are from any of our title grants that will be used to improve test participation. As you know, that 95% participation rate is the magical number, and that number was significantly diminished and still hasn't improved in the Long Island districts in particular that have a much more active parent refusal or student refusal rate for taking the test, also known as the opt-out movement. But that's good news. And finally, Mr. Clark and I received a letter today from a parent complimenting Mr. Stranaco, who's a math teacher at Wells. This is the letter that the parents wrote. Dear Dr. Henning Piedmont, my husband and I wanted to take a moment to share with you how pleased our family was to receive a postcard from Mr. Stranaco in the mail this weekend. Our 8th grade daughter, I won't mention her name, had received a 98 on her first algebra exam last week, and Mr. Stranaco took the time to send her a postcard congratulating her on this accomplishment. My daughter is so happy to have received this recognition. My husband and I both are teachers and know how busy Mr. Stranaco and teachers are. To see that he went above and beyond and took the extra time to recognize their daughter says a great deal about his commitment to his students. We felt that it was important to share this with you and acknowledge him for being so involved and dedicated. So kudos to Mr. Stranaco. That concludes my comments.
Thank you very much. Okay, so for my comments this evening, just wanted to recap our C19 meeting that we had last week. It's all one day to me. And I thought it went really well, and there were just a couple things that I'll just point out, comments that were made. It was said that teachers were cautionary, cautiously optimistic, can't remember anything. Yes, and with the opening and things seemed smooth compared to last year. Not that things were perfect yet, but that there was improvement, and it was noticed. Teachers were appreciative that they were allowed or offered other opportunities for different trainings and things that were needed for instruction, and that while there are still many initiatives going on, there is just better understanding, and we're continuing with that, and that there's a little bit less feeling of the overwhelmedness that goes on. But just, I think part of it was a lot more better understanding of direction and that, and I think part of that has to do with Michelle and Valerie put on a little bit of a slide presentation on what do we call it, learning strands? Is that, we got feedback on that, and Michelle kind of recapped a little bit of that, and that was helpful with staff. And then there were some concerns that were raised as well, just that the social emotional needs of the students, kind of K-12, that how that plays into the classroom, and the needs are just so great these days, and we talked about how we need to address some of that, as well as educational gaps. Students who might test in one level but yet in different areas, they might be strong in one area, but not necessarily another, or just a variety of different things, and how can we help support teachers in dealing with those many, issues that happen. And so, that's just, it was a lengthy meeting. I have 4 pages of notes. There's just a couple things to recap on. Overall, I thought it was a good meeting, and I had a chance at the end of the meeting. I was going to email, Rick and I were going to email, but we had a chance to talk about next steps. And there were some ideas that were kind of thrown out by the people that were present, and what we thought we would do for the next one, and I wanted to just ask the board if anyone had any thoughts as well. We were thinking, should we go building by building? If we're going to do this kind of consistently throughout the year, we wanted to make sure that all stakeholders had a voice at that table from all aspects of the district, from the teaching perspective. And so we were thinking, should we go building by building or something different, which is what we kind of agreed to, which would be to do a K-12 perspective. And we picked math as the first focus. Just because CV Star happens to be piloting 2 programs right now, and we thought maybe it would be a good time, instead of after all of the analysis that they do, to maybe be part of the conversation in the beginning to say, for the grades that they'll be leading into, middle school and then high school, what are the needs? So does this program eventually lead into the work that's, these kids need for the future? And I know that those cross conversations are happening, but this would just give us kind of a way, it's already happening, but for us in that C19 forum to have that discussion K-12 and to focus just math first. And, we'll go to the different departments and make sure everyone has a chance and opportunity to speak. K-12 actually. Oh, for the pilots, yeah, but no, for the next C19 meeting, we were thinking to do K-12. So because what we were talking about is, does that discussion happen? One of the things we started with our SCP was, to connect our buildings. We finally got K-5 connecting, and making sure that just in another avenue of conversation, I know 12th they're out the door, but like did the 12th get what they needed from 11th and 10th and just kind of down that way? And are we, because we've been focusing at this level, we want to make sure that it all connects and communicates up. Mm-hmm. And then, we'll pick the next department after that. So that was the thinking.
So all the teachers at the next C19 meeting will be math teachers?
That was the thinking. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to see if you guys had any thoughts on that before I email him to confirm, and then he would go back, kind of checking with his people as well. But yeah, just a way to start conversation and help with continuity for things. No, that's okay. So that's that piece, and then just the other thing, we've talked about this a lot, and it's having another an open forum as well as topic forums, and we really need to figure out, how we're going to do that with the community, and it potentially just be a couple board members, and we could alternate who is present for those conversations, perhaps with someone from the administration as well, and we could meet down here, it could be in an auditorium, I'm not sure, but we do need to get something on the calendar for the community, and for us to get a letter out and stuff. And I know, so Thursday, Chris and I are meeting. There's a communication committee with Jennifer Gary from BOCES, who's doing a lot of that work, so we can help get information better, out to the community. So it would be good for us to have some idea when I go to that meeting, so I can have her get some information out, and perhaps even from us or myself, on behalf of us, a letter to the community.
Suggesting the dates and topics.
Well, so like, for
Right.
example, we can start with an open forum. Maybe we don't have a topic just yet, but let's just create another avenue.
Right.
Maybe it's, if we don't have an executive session, perhaps they are before a board meeting, or, it could be a Saturday morning, it could be a Monday night before a board meeting, or it could be the Tuesday in between board meetings. So every Tuesday night is a board function, and who can come in, but again, we need to have something that allows for additional communication.
So are you, because we talked last year about the different the different groups and organizations
Mhm.
that are in Brewster, the Village and Southeast. Are we focusing on that, or are we talking about the community at
The
large?
community at large, and
Okay.
that's another
Okay.
discussion, but yeah, the community at large. Mhm.
Okay.
And as long as, there's not quorum, it's not an official meeting, it's just an exchange, an open dialogue. I mean, other districts that I've spoken to, they dedicate the first Saturday of every month. And, they rotate board members, and they sit somewhere in the community, not on school grounds, and that's what they do. Others just have open forums monthly, so it doesn't have to be, it could be the second the meeting, we could put it on a calendar, we could set out dates. But perhaps we can just put some thought if you guys wanna.
Maybe we can mix them up where there's some at night during the week and then one on a Saturday for people who can't do during the week at night. Change the dates, it's not always like the same.
Right.
Are we looking for once a month or?
Realistically.
Well, our thoughts, probably once a month, there's
Once a
so much, our calendars are booked.
I think even once a month is lofty, I've got to be honest with you. My personal thought, I'm not at all poo-pooing the idea, I just think we should maybe start a little bit smaller, and my thought would be to work with the groups and the agencies that we've established and to have a reception with them, invite them in, show them JFK, because a lot of the folks haven't seen JFK that don't have kids in the school. Some people in the Rotary, the Elks, VFW, start with them and then see where it progresses. We're gonna have focus groups coming down the pike pretty soon anyway for other things. So that would be my suggestion, but I'll do whatever the group feels is
No, I
most
think that's a good
beneficial.
idea, and that's, a one-time open invitation to a tour of things. But I think an open forum is different,
Unless what we do is the open forum at JFK. Then let's say the first one we do on the Tuesday, that there is no board meeting. I know November's gonna be kind of tight.
And
because
invite
of-
them specifically as well.
Right.
And part of that meeting could be a tour as well as open community.
Forum.
Okay, so how about this?
Combine the two ideas, basically.
The only Tuesday, November, we don't already have something,
Right.
is the 20th, and that's
The Tuesday
obviously
before
2 days
Thanksgiving.
before Thanksgiving. That's-
Okay, so then let's not maybe here
Unless
right
it's
now,
not
let's
a-
look at the calendar.
Unless we don't do it a Tuesday,
Yeah.
we do
Right.
it Thursday.
Okay.
Sonia, what
Yeah.
are we looking to accomplish?
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be answering any questions, is this gonna be a question and answer,
Well, I
without
think
having
it-
the entire board
Yeah,
there?
what I've seen other
I don't wanna be
districts
put on the
do.
spot.
No, and we wouldn't be able to answer questions that we can't answer. But I think, our board meetings are business meetings, and there's limited opportunity for exchange. And I've seen many districts set up other opportunities just to engage with the community for whatever they want to share. And it may be, I can't speak to that right now, but thank you for sharing, and then we can
Yeah,
decide if we
we have
put
an
it on an
answer.
agenda, or if we send out a letter, or how we respond to certain things, but at least it gives us an opportunity to engage in a different way. And like I said, many districts do all kinds of different things. Just whatever would work for us, yeah. So I'm thinking, then let's,
Maybe we'll.
Look at calendars and
We'll
we'll
look at
follow up.
calendars and then just via email, we'll decide on a date and we'll go from there.
okay, so we'll do that. And let's see what else. I think that's it for now. I'm drawing a blank, but that's it, that'll be good for now. Okay, so we have student representative from our, actually, no, I did want to say something else. I know I was writing something. I did want to, sorry. We talked about briefly after last meeting, it was lengthy. And we do want to acknowledge publicly that it was a very long meeting, and sometimes we do have in budget season, for those who hung around, those also are quite long. And it's not our intention to have super long meetings. We work our full day and come and we do that as well. So, we just want to acknowledge that we recognize that fact, and, we're being more mindful of our time and everyone's time who attends meetings. So I just wanted to say that. Okay, sorry, thank you. Our student representative,
Hi.
good evening.
Cameron actually couldn't make it tonight, so I'm taking over his part. We have a big day in the high school tomorrow. We have the CPR and career fair for seniors and the PSAT for all the other grades 9 through 11. And then at nighttime, 6 p.m., Mrs. Sullivan's going to be discussing AP testing and requirements for that. And then open house starts at 6:30, and the senior class and freshman class will be selling their fun pasta. Their fundraiser there at a table. Science Honor Society starts their recycling drive next week on Mondays and Thursdays, where they get all the bottles from the rooms and recycle them. October 16th, the high school's holding a kindness assembly with a 15-day kindness challenge. The Clarity Survey for Technology was out today with all students doing it, period 3. The flu clinic is November 1st for high school students. And Mu Alpha Theta, which is the Math Honor Society, is starting the pajama program again, which is getting new pajamas and books for children. And if somebody donates a pair of pajamas, they can wear pajamas to school that day, whatever day that they decide on. And tickets for the play go on sale tomorrow. It's a play called The Letters, and it's about the war, World War, so the veterans can all come free and see the play.
Okay, and now we move on to presentations, recognition, discussion. Our first item on the agenda is our residency officer and residency verification discussion, continued from our last meeting. So it's still an ongoing discussion. And does anybody want to start with any thoughts on the matter? We did post information, so for everyone's review, a few different things. So we posted a breakdown of costs, and we also posted a fairly recent finding by the commissioner on a case, a residency case that was denied by the commissioner and the reasons it was denied. So we have a breakdown of cost as well. So some of the things we have to consider are, where we're at in the process and where we're going. We know that we potentially need someone to oversee the process, and there is a breakdown in here of what the salary for such a person would be. If I find it correctly,
$46,200.
This is the officer plus the 35, 30, 49.
So about 50.
About 50.
Just under 50, yeah. To finish up the remainder of the school year, just for that portion. And the dollar amount reflected is projected based on, Victor, correct me if I'm wrong, the number of outstanding cases we know we want to look into further, but not taking into account the parents who have not updated their information yet with the district.
Correct.
Okay. So, and we know what that number is? I don't know if
It was 600.
it was 600 last, it's still around
Yeah.
600?
So that's 600 students?
600 students, so possibly 400 families, 300 families, depending on how many are siblings.
Right, who, and ultimately, so again, we had a timeline, we said September 28th so that we could have some sense of urgency, but, we still have, it's an ongoing process to acquire the information that we need and update every student's information. And, we do have current situations that we have to look into, and then we have to decide, if 600 students remain with information not updated, how are we going forward with that? Our process that's in place would ask of us to do an investigation, and follow up and see if in fact they reside here. And it could be anyone for any number of reasons that hasn't done it yet. And so here is our discussion. So this process, we knew it would have some expense to it. It wasn't originally budgeted with any dollar amount for the school year. So we essentially, I believe we are we pulling from savings? If we're going forward with this, is where we would have to get the money to do this? Okay. So these are the questions. You know, we started our process, we have the question of, you know, we have a central registrar now that we didn't have in the past. We can just allow this to be an ongoing process that we do just gradually over time, or we can be more aggressive with it, but we need to make those decisions. We're not voting on anything tonight specifically, but we need to get some idea of where we're headed.
How many families registered, complied?
We're tracing it on students. So we've had 2,600 students have submitted documentation. And of those 2,600, we still have quite a few that we're following up on. Just looking back on the presentation from the last board meeting, we still have 285 cases that are still under review for one of 3 different reasons.
How many? I'm sorry, 285?
285, the majority of which were put on our list because they only provided insufficient documents, meaning they were only able to provide one proof. You know, say for example, they were only able to provide a third-party residency statement, unable to provide something like a driver's license or something more substantial. So, you know, we were very conservative in developing this list and, you know, making sure that we weren't accepting weak documentation. So we went, you know, conservatively, and that's why that number was originally 347. 62 of those 347 we followed up on and were able to resolve them legitimately. But as of the last board meeting, 285 remained on that list. Again, the majority of them on that list because they provided insufficient documents.
So 285, and then we have another 600 that haven't complied.
Correct.
Well, and sorry.
No, Victor, it was, if I remember, the numbers were 46 in the first section, 46, and then 100 and something, right?
Correct.
The 100 and something, those were the ones with affidavits that, are mostly renters, am I remembering that correctly?
Right, so 193 submitted insufficient documents. So as an example, it would be a family provided a third-party statement saying that, you know, Joe Smith lives here. But Joe Smith was unable to provide anything other than that third-party statement. And it could, you know, could have been for various reasons. Joe Smith may have just moved in there and didn't have anything, and, you know, hadn't gotten his license updated at the DMV. But that's just an example.
See, here's my concern, in a case like that, I feel like this could be a financial black hole. I feel like we could just spend and spend and spend, and it's really not gonna get us anywhere. I'll use me as the example. I'm a renter. I don't have a lease with my landlord. I have a handshake agreement. And I would bet you that most people in Brewster do have a handshake agreement. So I typed up, and I'll come out and say it, a very flimsy lease. He signed it for me, I turned it in, I had other documentation, of course, but I know where I live. I am concerned that my situation is not so unusual. So what do we do with that 193? I mean, are you gonna come and investigate me? Feel free, I'm at 21 Blackberry. I know where I live, but it's money that's being wasted is my point. And I'm really concerned about that. I'm concerned about it because we know we have concerns at the lower grades, K through 5, where we need counselors, where we need to, you know, get some more support staff in there. Personally, I think we have to look at what road are we going down. I don't know that we need to make the decision tonight, but if we keep dipping into savings, this is gonna become a problem. And I would like to know, I'm on the finance committee. I don't know, Victor, if there's a meeting for finance set up that we could talk about what all these scenarios look like. Is that something that would be worthwhile, or is it moot? I don't know. I'm asking you, and I'm sort of putting that out to the group.
I mean, I'm also very concerned about the cost. I mean, to me, this is just a straight up cost benefit analysis. The first section under what's on the agenda are the costs through September 28, 2018, $96,000. So that's the cost. What are the benefits that we have? We have a registrar in place who is now probably knows more about residency than she ever thought she would know. We also have Victor and Denise, who have an incredible knowledge base now. We're gonna have that, so that's a benefit. We have updated information for a large number of the students. I mean, that is a good turnout of students for what is a voluntary program.
Yeah.
But when you go further in, we now have 600 students who, for whatever reason, their parents have not provided updated residency information. It could be because they don't feel they have the time. It could be they feel they don't have to do it. They don't want to do it. They forgot. It could be that they don't live here. We have no idea why, and we cannot force them to come in and do it. So now, we're going to be in a situation where what? What's the next step to follow up with these 600 students? We send a letter, maybe 50 come in, great. Now what do? We sure as hell are not going to do surveillance on 600 students. We cannot afford that. So it's you know, now I'm losing where are the benefits from this? We're going to spend money, and we don't have subpoena power. We can't make people come in and do this. And we also cannot assume that because they haven't done it, they don't live here. I mean, your scenario, you don't need a written lease in New York. An oral lease is legal in New York. That is an inherent weakness in the statute. So, you know, you can't just say, you can't give me a lease, tough luck. It's legal to have a month-to-month oral lease so, I mean, there's just, so I think when Victor was saying that originally the number was 347 and now it's down to 285, because you can go back and look at, okay, what were they able to give? They may not meet the criteria on our policy, but that's not required. We have to look at everything that they provide. So, you know, maybe that number can be pared down in a satisfactory way. But I mean, where is the end game here? This 600 student number, to me, is daunting.
Well, and then there's part two to it, which is, who will the residency officer be? And right now, it would be us, which is, from what I understand, according to NYSBA, there is no other district in the state of New York that has the board as the residency officer. So that would be kind of crazy to then say, okay, so now we have 600 kids, some might not be in Brewster, some might be, but you have to go before the board now. So then it becomes, there's a big ripple effect to this. So I mean, Carrie, I echo your sentiments, what you're saying. I just think this is a financial black hole.
Victor, go ahead. No. Victor, at what point do we not allow them in school?
You
can't.
So
Yeah.
even if they don't produce anything, this whole thing was fruitless.
If they don't, the burden of proof is on the school district. So if you have a family, just say, for example, say they're opposed to the program and they're protesting it, the burden of proof is on the school district. So we would have to then prove that the family doesn't reside in the home where they're saying that they resided. And the only way that we can really do it is through, there are, utility searches, and in a lot of cases, in those cases, we would be proving the affirmative. So we would be spending money to prove Joe Smith actually does live there. But the only way to do that would be through a private investigator and, showing up at, having them show up at the house and, serve them with something, and then you would be expending money on proving the affirmative. But the only way to exclude a student is through a formal process. It's set out by the state. It has to include a hearing, which is a last opportunity for a family to provide residency documents. So for example, if we said, okay, Joe Smith, we suspect that you don't live in district. And right now, all we have is a suspicion that they don't live in district. If we were to hold a residency hearing and they showed up and said, I don't have any documentation, even at that point, we wouldn't be able to exclude them. Again, the burden of proof is on the school district, and it's a substantial burden of proof, as you can see from some of the commissioners' opinions. So it's very difficult to actually exclude a family unless there is significant evidence that they're actually not residents.
Well, and they've already registered for that. The kids are already registered.
Right.
Whether it was 3 years ago or 10 years ago, they're registered, and that was the key point with the state education department, which is why they didn't shut us down, was that no one was disenrolled. We wanted updated information. So these 600 students are, it's perfectly legitimate for them to be coming to school. They are registered students here. So there's not a lot of pressure that we can put on parents or guardians to get in here.
Can't put any pressure on.
Well, there's no, yeah, and again, and if you have parents that are standing on their principles, thoughts, or values, for whatever reason.
That's what they're doing. 600 people are not coming in because
Right.
they're against it. I mean, come
So,
on.
and as Victor put, I have a hard time spending $200 times 600 students to basically prove that what we already know, that they live here.
Or even, let's assume some don't.
Right. We'll take,
You get right back to, okay, so let's say 100 of the 600, if we could, had all the resources in the world, and we successfully established that they didn't live here, and they're excluded from the district. At what cost is that? How does that translate into a benefit to the district? Because 100 kids over, how many grades? 13 grades. Are we to the point where, we don't need this teacher anymore because the class sizes are small enough? I mean, it's not gonna save on the lights, it's not gonna save on the salaries, it's not gonna save on all of the, so while those 100 students should not be educated in this district if they don't live here, can we justify the cost? I don't know.
I don't think it was the number of students, cost factor, and trying to save a position. I also think there was a message trying to be sent that you just can't come here to get your education. You live in a different town. We have the great programs for our residents. So yeah, there's a cost savings, but there's also a message that the community wanted to send.
And we've
Stop.
achieved that, though. We've achieved
I believe
that with
you
our
may have.
updated.
Very high price.
I don't think not $100,000 is a high price
No,
to keep people from coming here from Danbury.
And
I don't think that's a
I think the
high
$96,000, to me, can be justified for that reason too. Going forward, we have a stricter registration process that will hopefully, diminish issues like this in the past, in the future. But of course, people can move and things change. That was.
I want to just give Eric an opportunity.
Thank you. So Victor, I know you answered this question in the past, but those costs that we've put out so far on the benefits and salaries, that wasn't necessarily above and beyond, or was that above and beyond what we normally did? We put people who were going to receive those costs, those salaries and benefits, and asked them to do extra, or that was above and beyond what we had?
This is above and beyond. So
Okay.
this does not include the cost of our district registrar because that's her, normal job function. This is the additional cost of bringing in the extra help, the extra registrars over the summer. At various points throughout the day, we would have 5 or 6 registrars assisting our families as they came in. So this $96,000 is above and beyond our ordinary program.
My opinion on this is, I understand the concept that if we commit right now today to saying we are going to investigate every person who doesn't come in and doesn't bring in the paperwork, that we are opening ourselves up to finding a financial black hole, but I don't think we're there yet. I think we've done the first part of it, and I don't think that we should discount the integrity of what we were trying to do. It's unfortunate that I was not on the board when the decision was made to start this process, but there was obviously a recognition that we might have some issues here and that we should address them. And so we've asked for participation. And I feel like the people who are consciously disregarding we all know what they were supposed to do. I'm not talking about people who there was some sort of confusion as to whether or not they lived in district or not, but people who are legitimately committing fraud, obviously did not participate and obviously are not in that group. And I think to say we're going to ask for participation and then when that portion is done, to simply say, well, now we're going to give up on it, I think it really I think we're really missing the point. I mean, I understand it's expensive, and I don't take lightly at all the numbers that are going to be associated with this process, but it wasn't very long ago that we decided this was money worth spending. And I think we continue to reevaluate the process. But I think the idea that people who, for whatever reason, have come into the district and potentially moved out, potentially when they registered, they were legitimately district residents. I'm not talking about people who've never lived in Brewster, but people who moved out, but were able to in some way sort of work the system and figure these things out because it is such a good district that people will want to come to. I think just to turn around and to say, well, you know, we're gonna just sort of move on from this, it's getting a little too expensive for us right now, today, or in the very near future, I think we need to let this sort of play itself out and go to the next step. We knew that September 28th we were going to stop, you know, the simple verification process and the participatory part of it. Yes, it's gonna get harder, and yes, these cases are undoubtedly gonna get more expensive, but I think there's something to be said for, we said we were gonna start off and do this, we should continue to see it through. I think we've already started to look at the program and make adjustments to it. Realize, you know, who are the right personnel, where should it go, where shouldn't it go, and we've, we should always be reassessing this program, but we should, I think, to just simply say, it might get expensive, it's already expensive, it might get more expensive. I think the integrity of having people come into the district, I can't tell you the cost-benefit analysis. I can't tell you if X number of students go, even though we pay this much per student, that we're going to save that much. I know it doesn't work that way. But I also think there is something to, we shouldn't have to wait 12 years to have all the students who've registered previously cycle through the schools to know, you know what, we're very comfortable that everybody who goes to school here is entitled to go to school here. I think there's a financial stewardship part of this that makes a lot of sense. That goes beyond what we're spending to continue the process.
So when do we say when? Because at first we were looking at 85K, okay? These numbers hit us in the face now, we're at 185, okay? Now we're projected with numbers that's gonna be even larger than that. We've got 600 students. Kerry's point, I think we're taking a much greater risk trying to figure this stuff out. Already we're projecting numbers in 6 figures. I don't know if it's worth that additional step. I think we've achieved the target that we really went out to go achieve. And I think it's kind of, we're dipping and we're taking from savings that we didn't plan for. So that's the concern I'm having, because what happens, we have to look down the road and potentially we may be in a bind down the road because we took money from someplace that we didn't initially have, and now we're stuck. So if you can explain to me and tell me that there's a plan for that situation that will occur, I'll gladly listen. But right now, if we don't have the figures and the numbers to support this, I don't see how we can move forward with this. I really can't.
I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I was just gonna make a recommendation in terms of, so we have a central registrar. That's not going away, right? I don't see the harm in continuing to request updated information, student information from parents who didn't. We have a school year. We can always look at this come budget season, when we really are looking at dollars, and see where we're at that point. Did other parents finally get around to updating information? And, but with that, regardless, there's still a reality that, even the way it was done in the past, which is what many districts do, and the commissioner said was fine, and it's written in the law, that, and it's kind of unfortunate, but it is what it is, when people make note of someone else, or it's brought to our attention, however it's brought to our attention, and we do have some cases here that still warrant being looked into. And, we still need someone to oversee that piece. And yes, it's money for the just under 50,000 for the end of the year to have someone oversee the work we do have to do right now. We don't have to say we're investigating 600 other students or families or however it turns out in this moment. We can say we have enough work to do right now with just what has been presented to us. Because how else the job would be happening regardless. We have central registrar. We would regardless have to investigate things that come to our attention a year ago, 5 years from now, whatever, right? That's just what it is. It's always been, we've always done that. We've done investigations. I mean, I think that's the compromise for what we have to do right now.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't suggesting that we just cut bait and walk away. But there has to be realistic expectations put on what can be done and in what time period it can be done. Because what you're saying, I agree. I mean, we have to hire a residency officer. No, this board should not have to take that on, and it is probably not the appropriate group to take it on. So, and we need that going forward. We need a residency officer. So that's sort of a separate, but if what you're saying is that we will deal with the 285 student follow-up that Victor mentioned, and the 600 students that haven't yet, whose parents haven't yet come in the ordinary course of the registrar and residency officer's duties, that's fine. But if we are expecting sort of this massive push that we put on all
Well,
summer
we're
at
just
this
not
cost,
budgeted
that
for it. So,
I
I mean,
don't
I
agree with.
think to be fair and reasonable, and we do have cases that need to be looked into that have come to our attention. You know, and then again, come budget season, we can set some months down the road. We can see where we're at and assess at that point. Are we budgeting for this? Are we just maintaining how we're doing it, that we're gonna still continue to request information and slowly people will trickle in with updating things? You know, we have to find a compromise on the expense and the need.
Well, the residency officer has to happen. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. It's not like we have a registrar who needs a manager. So that, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. I think at this point, the process does need to continue as far as trying to get these other 600 to register. Obviously, the more blatant ones, which in the past we would have investigated anyway, those need to get done the same way they would have 2 years ago or 3 years ago. As far as this other 285 right now, you know, I mean, we have to concentrate on getting a residency officer, number one, and the second thing that we have to do is try to get the, you know, everyone else the information we need, the verification, and and go from there. And as Eric put, at that point, revisit it again. Okay, so now we're, out of everything, we've got 90% of the kids are registered, re-verified their address and whatever, and we're left with 100 kids, and I'm just picking a number. And then we can decide on a case-by-case basis at that point. But that's what the residency officer's job is, not ours. And, so I think at this point, it would be residency officer and continue the process. Can't just flip the switch and say no.
Yeah, we have an obligation to track those 285 people. That's what this was about. And when the red flags went up, now this district has an obligation to follow through at minimum those people.
But, and I'm gonna play devil's advocate on that one, because our first obligation is to all the kids. It's not tracking down the addresses. If we financially could do it, sure, but it's sounding like we can't. If, like Carrie said, the cost analysis, if it starts taking away from our regular programs, if we're starting to dip into savings, which we are, my question for you is going to be, does that affect our, I know we get a rating or a credit, does that, once we start dipping into savings,
And
isn't
we're
there
going
like a
into an
ripple
audit.
effect with that?
If we were to do it on a recurring basis,
Okay.
then it would indicate financial instability.
Okay,
One-time costs typically don't affect your bond rate.
okay. And then I guess my question would then be, which you don't have to answer now, is how much money is okay to take out of savings? So, at what point do we start crossing the line? So I guess my point is, if we're looking at K through 5, which we've heard needing more supports, and then we're looking at tracking down 185 kids or 285, I'm gonna go with getting support for the kids in the schools. But I also agree with what you're saying, Sonia. I don't think it needs to stop completely. I think the registrar during the course of her normal day can still make the phone calls, can still mail out a letter, can still follow up with these people. There's no harm done with that. And then we can pursue looking for a residency officer. I mean, I think that seems to, you know, in my ideal world, make the most sense,
Well,
but,
the residency officer will also do this kind of.
Will assist
yeah,
and guide.
yeah.
And I really think it's realistic to, I think we all understand and expect, but that this is now going to take longer than we had originally anticipated. You know, this isn't necessarily
It was
about a
lofty.
timeline.
Yeah, it was lofty. You're talking, you know, whatever, 3,200, 3,300 students. It's a lofty goal. We are getting there, but again, the registrar is still continuing. You know, nobody's saying that, you know, okay, that's gone. But we do have money, we need to spend money on the students that need the help.
And believe me, I think this goes without saying, but I think everybody understands. I'm not saying we should take away from any sort of, you know, in the classroom or services or anything like that. It's the idea that, for me, this still seems like, and Glenn, to your point, I don't know where the line is, but I can tell you that, to me, the work that was done and the reasons that this process was started, to me, are still valid enough that it should continue. We might have to make some changes and figure out some things and learn as we go, because we're doing something that really, you know, obviously hasn't been done here before. But to me, I think this is still valuable work.
Well, and maybe there are ways to categorize well, all of the ones to follow up on and the 600 that haven't re-verified. I mean, if it's a senior in high school, we shouldn't be wasting our time. He or she is not going anywhere. If it's a junior in high school, we probably should not be wasting our time, because by the time appeals are, you know, our own policy allows a senior to stay. So, you know, that may only be 5 kids, but, you know, maybe there's ways to categorize. Maybe we should focus on the lower grades, you know what I mean, kids who are starting out here, to make sure. I don't know, but maybe those are ways to prioritize the students who haven't yet satisfied the requirement.
So if I can, so we can move on, I think we have a general agreement to go forward with a residency officer and fill that position.
Are we
Do we have to
looking
vote on
outside the
that?
district, outside of?
Well, we'll have to,
We have to vote on that.
Kathleen, you would know whether it doesn't have to be like a civil
No.
service position or,
No, we're talking about using somebody on a per diem basis, so it's instead of employing somebody and saying you're gonna be working every day from now to June 30th, we're gonna use them on an as-needed basis. I mean, they would touch base with the registrar, obviously, and communicate with the registrar on a regular basis, but then they would be involved in whatever
But
research.
not somebody that's employed by the district direct? Is that,
No.
that's my question, is this?
Right.
Maybe someone new.
Yeah.
Would be
Someone new,
somebody
yeah.
outside the district?
Yeah.
So we would have to
Someone with
hire.
like an administrative type of credential, I'm assuming, right? Okay.
okay, right, and then we can work out the details and more, but for, at least for now, you know, that's something that we're going to go forward with. No, we don't need to vote on it, because it's,
Okay.
you know, important. Okay, so we'll move on now to our second presentation. I'll try to make this one quick. So this has to do with the New York State School Boards Association Annual Business Meeting. So exactly what we're doing right now, and then we have our action items and we vote on all that stuff. Yearly, all 700 plus New York State school districts converge in one spot, and they have a business meeting, and it's a lot of fun if you ever want to come, 30, you know. And I get a paddle and I get to raise yes or no. So I need to know how I'm voting on behalf of our district at that meeting for these following resolutions. And basically what it is NYSBA is our, I don't want to say our lobbyists, but they're the ones who advocate, you know, on our behalf with Albany in passing laws and things that we need. So something for us to consider in spring. The resolutions that are on here are put forward by school districts. NYSBA doesn't make them up necessarily on their own. School districts put them forward based on just what they've seen throughout the school year. And they come up with language, and then NYSBA will, or, you know, put them together, and then the boards can decide. So we haven't put anything forward ever, but if at some point, and spring's usually when it needs to be submitted. So just keep that in the back of your mind as we're going through the school year. But I just need to go through them quickly to know what your thoughts are on how I should vote. So, they're in the, I'm sorry, just need to look it up here.
We have the proposed, the ones that NISBA
Just want to see what.
is recommending
Mhm.
for adoption, and then the ones that they're opposing.
Right. So I met with Westchester Putnam School Boards, you see that there, the resolution worksheet. And we went through, so the Westchester Putnam School Boards met, and we went through it together on, and had a discussion of where we thought, and some recommendations were made to change some language. But I'm gonna go through them real quickly. Oh, they did put it in here? Oh, that was good.
Sonia, do you mind me asking,
No.
did everyone read through these already?
I did.
I mean, I could just tell you off the bat that I'm in support of all of them. I don't know if you wanted to do that around the table, I don't know if anyone has specific comments on anything, but
I mean, it's fine, they are posted if the public wants to read through them, because there are 20.
There's
And usually we go through them line by line. Let me look at if anything's outstanding. So, just maybe let me talk about a couple, because they presented some question and language changes. Well, let me ask this first, was anybody opposed to anything that they read through on the resolutions necessarily? No, or in the way the recommendations are, no, okay. So, just to go over a couple real quick. Okay, so the first one, proposed resolution recommended for adoption. And it had to do with, obviously, a topic that's one of these divisive topics. And so there was discussion on changing the language. It had to do with NISBA supports legislation to improve school safety by reducing access to guns. And so many districts got into discussions about the inclusion of guns and what does that mean. And the reason for that was because the language in the current legislation or the advocacy work it wasn't updated. It talked about, so it's not that they're talking about just guns. It's an additional, it's adding to the work already being done, because the old language has to do with bombs and
Threats and fire.
other kinds of threats that weren't, and guns were not put into that original language. So that was why this was added. But boards did decide, the discussion was, we could make a motion on the floor to change the language to just be more broad and inclusive of any threat, and to have legislation that supports improving school safety and provides $1 million for that. So that was a discussion that we talked about, that someone can raise, because you can do that on the floor just like we do here, you can amend the language, and to amend it to be broader than just specific. But that was why it was very specific, because there's already language out there talking about other types of threats. Another big topic was NISBA supports proposals making kindergarten attendance mandatory. And that was another topic for different reasons, because it didn't come with increased funding, but so they were looking for how can we, if we're gonna do this, and we have it already, and then it's just a lot of discussion about, well, support, and some districts can't afford the full day or they don't have it yet, and it's very few, it's like a handful in the whole state. So it's really to get a few districts in the state kind of on board with kindergarten. And let's see. Sorry, since I'm just skipping through, I just want to see anything else that's important. Okay, I'll do 15 first. So that one, there was an issue with the word mass violence, if you go down to 15. So NISBA shall pursue an amendment to Penal Law Article 240 entitled Falsely Reporting an Incident to criminalize falsely threatening use of a gun or making threats of mass violence on public school property. So it was a discussion about what does that mean, and just basically what if a student the concern was if a kid's just talking but doesn't mean it versus a real threat, And how do you decipher between that? So that was kind of a concern in the discussion. There's many kinds of threats, so, but again, and then 16, NISBA supports state legislation that would allow school districts, by vote of the school board, the option to hold their school district elections at publicly accessible locations within their district boundaries based on security concerns. Many reasons, we all know them. What the discussion on that was to add within their school district boundaries, because there were some districts that when you have other towns involved, it wasn't clear, you know, if you say Brewster, that they just wanted to be clear that it was the school district boundaries as they go into other towns as well.
And it's limited to school district elections, so this isn't like general elections, where we just had like the concern about
Right.
sex offenders being able to come in. And that is not something that, the location of those general elections being at the schools, I don't think has anything to do with, I don't think the schools have anything to do with that.
No, so
This is
those are
really
two
a
different
school
issues, at least it's the school elections, but there has been, you know, talk, and there are articles out there of other school districts fighting for,
You got them.
to
To
get
get them moved.
those moved as well.
Right.
But this is, you know, the activism that we do and fight for. That wasn't brought up at this meeting.
Mhm.
Um,
Why? Because I don't think the school districts have any say in that, really. I didn't
Well,
think
it was
we had
also-
But you can
elections.
still fight for
Right.
laws to be changed, you can still create movement.
Right, but this was also, don't forget, most of these were written last spring. Over
Correct.
and this just became
And
an
someone
issue.
may very well make a proposal on the floor to add
That
this.
as well.
And, yeah, so that's kind of it. The reason for when they not recommend to not adopt something, it's generally because, whether it's right or wrong, I don't know, but it sometimes only deals with a specific district. And, you know, it's a lot of resources and manpower, you know, for a specific situation pertaining to a district somewhere in New York State. And, or perhaps the language is similar enough to something else that's being proposed, and they can kind of work together. So that's it. So if you guys are all okay with how it's presented, and like I said, there was some language changes, but other than that, then we can move on, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me know if you have any second thoughts on that.
So now you know how to raise your
And
panel.
then we can have it. And if I'm sick, Carrie?
No, don't get sick.
Okay, so now we, actually, before we move on to our action items, so lately, I've started a new opportunity for our public to speak just on our action items before we get into them. And then there's, of course, opportunity at the end to speak of other topics that anyone may have come to speak on. So if I can just ask Susan, if you would just mark the time for 2 minutes. And if anyone has any comments that they'd like to make specifically on any action items. So if you have thoughts or questions you're looking to have answered by us during this portion, you know, please feel free to raise them now and we'll address them during our discussion. So anything specific to the action items?
I do.
Yeah,
I saw it.
If you could.
I have to walk away.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Trying.
All right. Thank God I'm short. Hi, I'm Francine Santos. I saw on the amended contract for Eric Rose that it's now only you that are able to request him. So I just wanted to make sure that was clarified and that it wasn't that there's going to be the old contract and this contract, this is just it.
Correct.
That was
So-
it.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
It's under 2 minutes.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, so we'll move on to action items. Our first item is approval of the SALT resolution. So, as elected officials, these are things that come to our attention, resolutions like this. And we're, of course, always able to put one together ourselves and put it out into the universe. We didn't do this one, but it came to us. Many school districts have already passed this, doesn't mean we have to. But if I can ask Victor to just speak to SALT again
Sure. So
briefly, and how And what does it mean, because, you know, it's not a school district thing, but it affects taxes and ultimately schools, so if you can, yeah.
So SALT is an acronym for state and local income tax. And under the old tax laws, most homeowners had the option of either itemizing their deductions for federal income tax purposes, or they would choose the standard deduction, which was a set limit by the the federal government. If you chose to itemize your deductions, one of those deductions that most homeowners took advantage of was the income tax deduction paid to New York State. And that would become part of your itemized deductions in addition to your mortgage interest paid and whatever other qualifying deductions that you had for federal income tax purposes. Under the new federal income tax law, they've removed the ability for homeowners to deduct their income taxes on their federal income tax return, or they've limited it to just $10,000. So if you pay more than $10,000 in local income tax, it is no longer eligible for deduction in federal tax purposes. However, the flip side of that is that with the federal income tax laws now, they significantly increased the standard deduction. So for each homeowner, it could be different whether or not you benefit from the new tax law or if you're in a detriment from the new tax law. But in a lot of mostly southern Westchester and Long Island districts where they're paying a significant amount of property taxes, the feeling is that they've been hurt by the new federal tax laws. And this resolution appears to participate with all of those groups in, I guess, seeking more information from the federal government with regard to New York State taxpayers' ability to deduct their local income taxes for federal purposes.
Okay, thank you.
It's my belief.
So, this resolution, I'm just gonna, not gonna read the whole thing, but I will read what we're asking, the piece of, from the last whereas. So, whereas the IRS has invited the public to submit comments on the proposed regulations no later than October 11th. The reason that they did this, when we were at West Putt and they put this out there, was because, and Victor, my understanding is they have to acknowledge receipt of the concerns put forward to them and reply to them.
So there's a comment period that the state is requesting of the other local governments. And I believe that they're doing that in anticipation of their appeal to the federal government, or a lawsuit waged on the federal government to appeal the federal tax laws.
Okay, so this is our opportunity to say our piece, I guess. So now therefore be it resolved that government interest, I guess would be Brewster Board of Ed, believes the proposed regulations issued by the IRS on August 23rd, 2018 dramatically impair the incentives for individual taxpayers to make contributions to these charitable reserve funds as established by law in the state of New York, and in doing so impair the mission of these funds, namely providing a high-quality public education to all children residing within the district, providing necessary and high-quality public services to all residences of Brewster. And it goes on to just talk about the limitations of it, and I thought it made a proposal. Which one? Oh, go ahead, read it. Which one are you looking at?
On page 2B, further resolve finds it necessary and appropriate to propose changes to the proposed regulations issued by the IRS to provide additional clarity for taxpayers and to explain and remove any arbitrary distinctions that would effectively and unfairly disadvantage the taxpayers.
Right, so I mean, that's the gist of it, and further resolve to shall seek, the last paragraph, to collaborate with other like-minded state, county, municipality, and or school agencies, etc. So it's just, our way to have a voice in the conversation, to advocate on behalf of our taxpayers, who pay for public education. So it's on the agenda as an action item. I need a motion. Diane in a second, Kristen. And are there any questions or comments on on the resolution.
Yeah, I have a question, which I guess Victor would be the person to answer. When it's talking about a charitable reserve fund, that I think it's saying taxpayers are less likely to contribute to, can you explain that?
So New York State and a few other states, I believe Connecticut and also New Jersey, established through state law a charitable contribution fund, which was a vehicle to circumvent the federal tax laws, which would allow a taxpayer, in lieu of paying their property tax bill, instead to make a charitable contribution to the district, which would then, in theory, which would then qualify as a deduction for federal income tax purposes. However, the IRS interpreted this, or I should say the IRS, in interpreting this, put out a statement that for federal income tax purposes, it's the federal government that will qualify the nature of a payment in determining whether or not it's deductible for federal income tax purposes. So again, the state created a vehicle, in their opinion, that would allow taxpayers to make a deduction that would be deductible for federal tax purposes. The IRS responded and said that the federal government will interpret what's deductible or not deductible, not the states. So it basically struck down the charitable funds contribution process, which is why the states are now looking to appeal the federal income tax laws.
Thank you.
Does anyone want to change any of the language in this? Because we don't have to submit it as is, or are we fine with the language as is? Very good.
We're waiting on
You
Gary.
like it?
Oh, I'm not looking to change any language. No,
Okay.
I'm sorry, I was just reading.
Anyone else, questions or comments? Okay, so all those in favor? And the motion passes 7-0. Okay, so we move on to approval of amended contract with Eric Gross. And yes, as was pointed out, the language was changed. We thought just for simplicity, just this way we're not confused who, when, why. We would still communicate, and if Valerie thought there was something urgent, we would communicate about it quickly and put it out there. But as it states, there's no requirements in it if you compare it to the previous contract. And we did start a contract with him, so we do need to finish out the year. And he did agree to the changed language. So I need a motion. Glenn, and a second. Eric, any questions or comments?
Yeah, Sonia, I don't know, maybe I misunderstood. I thought it was going to be you and or Valerie can contact him. Did I misunderstand that?
Yes, we talked about that.
We
in the
had a
last meeting.
conversation about it and
Yeah,
agreed
in
to
talking to him
this.
about
Okay, thank you, okay.
Yeah, just making sure with him it was okay, and then just to not have it be confusing or too many people.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, thank
So,
you.
Okay?
So
Yes.
I'm just a little confused as to why we pay a reporter.
So
Common
if you,
report.
yeah, I mean, and for me, I guess historically, because this predates my term on the board, and many districts still have him full on, their only person. It's not
He's
just
been around
us.
forever.
Right, and many districts use
he's
him,
been
and I
around since I'm
think
in high school.
what happened is, and I don't know, I'm guessing.
Yes.
But it seems that, the districts utilized him in an additional manner. So not just the newspaper guy, he was also the guy that could come into districts and work with districts to get information out. There wasn't social media, if you go back far enough, there wasn't ways, there wasn't a lot of stuff. And so districts contacted with him, again, I think, as far as I know, I don't want to quote districts, but I know there are those around us that still do contract with him. And,
I just find it such a conflict of interest.
well, again, you have to go back in time.
I know.
You're right, and perhaps because he was a media person, and I don't know, I don't have the story and the history on all of it. I just know that, here we are.
He also produces content that doesn't have anything to do with his media
Correct,
outlet.
he still does his own
So
thing.
we're not necessarily paying him to put something in his outlet
No.
that he's employed by, it's to
Oh,
create
it's
other
separate
content,
stuff.
separate
Okay.
stuff, yeah.
That's my confusion. I thought
Right.
it was for the
No, so it's at our request, and there was in the previous contract, if you read it, it was outlined, you know, he would come into the district, the buildings, and there was information in the different mailboxes for him, or however it was set up.
I thought he was reporting back to his newspaper.
Not
Some of it
unless
was-
it was very specific to something that we did with him, but generally, no, it was
Okay.
that's his domain, and the stuff he did, like the interviews and the videos and spotlight, yeah, all those different things, right. And again, BOCES, there wasn't a person at BOCES to use, there wasn't social media, there wasn't a lot of what
It
exists
wasn't
today. Yeah, so, you know, again, we have a modified contract that is more limiting in what it says, and come next reorg, you know, we can discuss where we're at that point and how we're going forward, especially having had a year with our BOCES person and how that works. So, yeah, again, I don't have Steve's not here to give us the 20-year history on it. Okay, so we've had motions and seconds?
Yep.
And any other questions or comments? No? Okay, all those in favor? And it passes 7-0. Thank you very much. Okay, we move on to approval of contract extensions for 2 assistant superintendents and the director of HR. Okay, so as per our discussion from our last meeting, you know, we discussed the needs of our district and creating contracts that were more consistent with the other administrators in the district, and stability in our district office, some things that we thought were very important. And so we were able to have those discussions and negotiate them with our attorney and the parties referenced here. So I need a motion, Kristen, and a second, Eric. And any questions or comments or any other pieces to add to whatever I just said?
No, last meeting, said it all.
Okay. All those in favor? And the motion passes 7-0. Thank you. Okay, so approval of contract with Leonore Volpe for appointment, provisional assistant supervisor of transportation. And I believe you mentioned that earlier.
Yes, Leonore's been with the district since 2000. She started out as a bus driver and has worked her way up, and she will be replacing the position vacated by Mary Smith.
Okay. May I have a motion? Glenn in a second, Diane. Any questions or comments on this item? No. Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion passes 7-0. Approval of contract with Anthony Chiesa for appointment, Wells Middle School head custodian. Thank you. I didn't want to say that.
This is also a promotion for Anthony, who's been with the district since 1993.
Okay, thank you. I need a motion. Glenn in a second, Eric. Any questions or comments on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion passes 7-0. Okay, approval of SEIU MOA.
This is to create the title of dispatcher and Spanish speaking dispatcher. Right now, the job duties are being filled by a school transportation operations assistant, and with Leonore vacating one of those positions, we felt it was more appropriate and more aligned in what the actual job duties are.
Okay, I need a motion, please. Diane, and a second to Kristen. Any questions or comments on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion passes 7-0. Approval of assignment of proposed pilot agreement, Ahana Hospitality Group, approved at the 4/24/18 Board of Ed meeting. So we see an update on.
Correct. So again, at the April 24th meeting, the board approved a pilot agreement with Greenwich Hospitality Group. It's a standard pilot agreement, and the facilities are located at 7 to 11 Peach Lake Road. Their attorneys have notified our attorneys that the property has been transferred to a related company. So Ahana and Greenwich Hospitality are related companies. Through an IRS 1031 like-kind exchange, the rights to this property has been transferred from Greenwich to Ahana. Again, there are no changes to the pilot application or any of the terms of the pilot agreement, except for the assigning, which would now be Ahana. So our attorneys have drafted a resolution for the board's recognition of the transfer of rights from Greenwich Hospitality to Ahana.
Okay, thank you. I need a motion. Kristen, in a second. Eric? Any questions or comments? And I'm just gonna ask an obvious question. So just because they agreed to, you know, one business selling to another, or however it happened, we don't need to renegotiate or reconsider anything?
The thing about pilot agreements is that the school board actually doesn't have any rights to oppose a pilot agreement unless it was something other than a standard 10-year agreement. So this is, you know, while the Putnam County IDA, who really oversees all of these pilot agreements, is giving the board an opportunity to just be aware of these things, the reality is the board has very little, or actually has no recourse if the board was to oppose any of these pilot agreements. But again, you know, the Putnam County IDA and the town of Southeast, town of Patterson, they've been exceptional at notifying the board of these pilot agreements that are coming down the pike. But again, there's no recourse of the school board unless the developer is seeking something above and beyond what a standard of pilot agreement typically entails.
So our approval, we could say yes or say no, and at the end of the day, it doesn't have much weight, but we still need to.
Essentially,
go through the
yes,
motion?
and again, it's a good faith effort of the Putnam County IDA and the towns in working with the schools to let them know that these pilot agreements are in the works. So it's more, it's more of a formality that they're notifying us, but it's a great thing. In my former district, we didn't have that good relationship with the other municipalities, so it's extremely, beneficial for the school to be notified in advance of these things, so.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? So all those in favor? Motion passes 7-0. Approval of agreement with tutoring company Strategic Learning Incorporated.
Yes, thank you. This is paperwork to approve Strategic Learning as one of our tutoring options for the 18-19 school year. We've had a long-standing relationship with them, and here's the paperwork that backs up all of our necessary requirements.
Thank you. I need a motion. Diane, in a second. Kristen, questions, comments?
Michelle, did they only provide for the kids that can't make it to school? Is that what this service is for?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Who are home for either illness or disciplinary incidents.
Anyone else? All those in favor? Motion passes 7-0. And approval of policies, second read, 4513, instructional materials selection, first read, 1530, smoking tobacco use, 5311.5, student dress code, 5312, prohibited conduct. I don't know which number belongs to which one. 5312.2, weapons in school, approval of elimination of policy, and 5312.3, smoking.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, take that one.
The number precedes the.
I know, but I got confused in the middle.
So as always, these policies have been reviewed by legal counsel and our policy committee and are put forward for your approval.
Thank you. I need a motion. Eric, and a second, Kristen. Questions or comments on any of these policies? Trust your work. Okay, so all those in favor? Motion passes 7-0. And consent agenda. I need a motion. Diane, and a second, Glenn. Any questions or comments on anything in the consent agenda? Okay, all those in favor? Motion passes 7-0. And board remarks, committee updates.
Well, Michelle took my thunder about the policy committee, so that's really all I have. It's fine.
Victor, when you talked about the audit committee, I don't remember, I was listening, but I don't know if I missed it. Did you talk about, we were talking about what would be next? We started discussing,
As part of our overall risk assessment, which there are two audits that the district has actually, there's really three. There's a claims audit process, there's an internal audit, and an external audit. The external audit is the financial statement audit, which is required each year that we present our financial statements and send it up to New York State. The internal audit is more of a process audit to make sure that we have internal controls in place, to make sure that everything is operating efficiently and above standard. We have a risk assessment each fall, which is a global look at the school district's operations. And then we also have a more focused area audit called the focus area audit, which looks at a specific function of the district. And the audit committee chose facilities, buildings and grounds as the focus area of the focus area audit for the 2018-2019 school year. The field work for the audit will take place during this winter and spring, and the audit committee will then be presented with the findings of the internal audit focus area next spring, and again presented to the board back probably in May or June of 2019.
Perfect, thank you. And then just something I wanted to bring up for us to consider in my spare time, as I perused other school districts and their websites and the work they do, and then Valerie had also presented me with some stuff she had come across regarding minutes. This is something for a few years I kind of had it on my head, and I brought it up now and then, and I thought I'll just bring it up again, and everyone can share their thoughts on it. So our minutes that we post, we have video now, so people can go and watch sometimes a lengthy video. Our minutes, though, are really just kind of A1 and yes and no and who, and it's the minimum required by law. And some districts have very lengthy transcripts, and others have found a compromise of the two things. And I think it was Somers that we found that had kind of a good outline of how they do their minutes. And I thought maybe I could get a copy to all of you just to take a look and see if we could put that. Because I think that while someone may have the time to watch through the hours of the video or whatever, it's easy, I think, especially if it's in board docs. They could do a word search, and then there would actually be more direction for them to find what meeting something was at. Because it'll kind of. Yes, I'm sorry, Susan, if we do want to do this, it might require a little more typing, but it would just be a little more helpful, I think, because even myself, when I want to go back to some of our videos to remember things, I'm scrolling through and I don't know if I've missed things, and I think it would be helpful for us to just have just a little bit more detail in our minutes. So if it's okay, I just want to give you all a copy of a couple ideas, and then you can just chime in another meeting. Yeah, okay. That's it for me.
I wanted to bring something up. I had sent out an email about Avid. I don't know if anyone had a chance to look at it or, in your spare time. Avid is advancement via individual determination. It's a nationwide program. I don't think it's international, but I know it's nationwide. I'm only familiar with it at the secondary level, but I know they do have it K-8 as well. And the premise is that the program supports kids who are kind of in that middle group, as well as you have other qualifying criteria. I think one is low socioeconomic status, first time in college, and I can't remember the other ones, but I think there was a list of 5 criteria. It addresses our social emotional needs according to our strategic coherence plan. It helps close the achievement gap, and what it looks like, at least I could tell you what it looked like in my former school. I liken it to a special ed resource program where the kids go 1 period a day to their Avid program teacher, their Avid coordinator, and they get support. And that coordinator reaches out to the content teachers, the Avid content teachers, and they work with the kids to help get through the academics, and the whole premise is to get them into more rigorous classes, AP classes, honors classes, and to get them into college. I'm bringing it up because I actually forgot about it, but I think it would be something that would be really good for Brewster to at least look into. And again, I don't know what K-8 looks like. I'm only familiar with secondary, but I know that a lot of schools do it, and it really is a very strong program. It does require some training for teachers and some money, but I'm not sure how much, to be honest with you. So I'm throwing that out there to the group. Is this something that we would want to give our blessing to, I look at Michelle because your curriculum. Is this something we would want to give Michelle our blessing with pursuing, or at least looking into to see if it fits with Brewster?
Well, the only thing I'm thinking is, and I know we're gonna put it, I think, on our next agenda, is one of our new mandates from the state, the social emotional, mixing two concepts, the social emotional piece, and addressing different gaps, which also did come up in the C19 meeting, that there are these gaps that need to address. And we need to come up with, and again, we'll discuss at our next meeting, how we're going to comply with this new mandate. And I don't know, I mean, perhaps this could be something, I don't know, but if it fits the mandate, if we have something that already does, that would be better, because, you know, if there is cost, but maybe it's minimal, and I don't know. But, you know, I don't know, again, perhaps it fits some of the needs we do have, because, you know, we're gonna have to fit that. That was my thought.
Well, we've always continually had an issue with the kids in the middle. That's always been an issue I've always seen. So I don't see any harm in looking into it unless there's something that we currently have in its place. And again, I don't think we do, because I know the average kid, that one in the middle is oftentimes overlooked.
I mean, yeah, as long as
But I mean,
it's not adding
Another
more
another
stuff, but
program
if
and
it
another
serves,
stuff,
fills
yeah,
a
I mean,
need, yeah.
that's what we do have to consider that, and obviously we have expense to consider, but, I mean, if we could get some additional information, and see, all right, maybe it is something to pursue, and maybe it's not, I don't know. But I did read it, I did kind of like some of the approaches that they had, and again, you know, there's a lot of kids that are left in a hole.
And the nice thing about Avid is that you can start really small. You don't have to say we're going to focus on 9 through 12. It could be we're going to focus on this small cohort of 10th graders, let's say, and you can, you know, you have the kids, from what I remember, they may be applying to the program, though that may have changed throughout the years. But I don't know, I look at Valerie and Michelle and
Well,
think,
we
is this
actually
something-
had this conversation a couple of years ago, Michelle and I. We learned about Avid. I forget what we were doing, and that came up. And I had mentioned to Michelle that I was familiar with it from my last district, where there were two that I knew of very successful implementations in schools that had a population of youngsters in the middle who were not necessarily from families who had children in college, or who you know, had the same opportunities. And this closed the achievement gap. Of course, it's in our best interest because ESSA requires us. You know, this is a big focus of ESSA, which is improvement in all the areas. You know, not just the traditional areas of, you know, students with disabilities or English as a new language learners. Every group in ESSA has to make progress over time. So we can't, you know, necessarily look at what we're doing and saying that we have something in place for that. So, and one of the districts, Suffern, it used to be Ramapo East, or Ramapo Central School District became Suffern. You know, you know, if you were to look at their socioeconomic, you know, data, you know, they were, you know, it looks like they had many more families who certainly didn't qualify for free reduced lunch. So, but yet they had a population of families who, you know, could benefit from this. So it's not it doesn't designate a district, you know, as, you know, you have these data, so you must, you have a certain, you must join the club, but that, it's proactive. And when Michelle and I looked at it, we were interested in the STEM component of Avid. There are a lot of layers, as Ms. Kikau mentioned, to this. And, you know, you can't pick and choose. You can't, you know, there's no a la carte, you know, process. So you have to engage fully, and then you can take advantage of everything that's in this collection of resources. There's an investment of time. There's also an investment of professional learning. So you know, like IB and other programs, you can't use their name and not go through the process of being, you know, selected and also participating fully, so you can, you know, reap the benefits that the program proclaims to have when it's used with fidelity. So if you'd like, Michelle and I can look further, we can bring it forward to a future board meeting and present what we know about Abbott in terms of cost, in terms of, you know, how we can enter and use this. And you saw in our presentation, you know, where we have need. I mean, it's not like we don't, you know, have some areas where you know, this could be not, you know, there's no magic, you know, solution to any of these things, but one of the approaches would be to proactively close gaps, focus on students, and provide them with some incentives beyond what their families may be able to provide that would help us in the end, and most importantly, help them.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, it's a presentation of information, so it doesn't obligate us to anything. I don't think it hurts, and
I mean,
we can see it. Yeah.
It's fine.
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
So I am the liaison for the Brewster Education Foundation, and I just wanted to, first of all, anybody who's not familiar with the Brewster Education Foundation, they do great work. They really enhance the learning environment here in the school and provide a lot of different things that potentially we wouldn't have the ability to do, that really makes this kind of a special place to go to school. Just wanted to let everybody know we're in the midst of one of our fundraisers, which is the Corvette raffle. Those tickets are still available. They're $100 a piece. You have the opportunity to win, obviously, a Corvette or a cash payout. So we've been working to mobilize to get those tickets sold. We were at homecoming. A number of BEF members were there at homecoming selling raffle tickets. We had some success, but just wanted to put it out to everybody. I think November 14th, sometime mid-November.
10th.
November 10th is the drawing. So this is a great opportunity. Go on the website, bef.org, and you know, maybe go in with 4 or 5 other people, split the cost. Like I said, $100 per ticket. But just wanted to make sure I got the word out there so people can take advantage of that, and hopefully, you know, let the BEF continue to do what they've been doing for years, which is really enhance the experience here at the schools.
Anything else? No? Okay, we move on to public remarks. If anyone has anything to comment on, please come up, and Susan, you'll just indicate when it's 2 minutes. Thank you.
So the residency verification was such a lofty task because we were the weakest link in all the surrounding school districts. Every other surrounding school district had a higher bar. You have 600 kids, that's 400 families. We can access the public databases to see who owns the house and pays taxes. Not everybody's going to be a homeowner, but if you figure about 50% rate, you just cut the number of people that you have to look at by 200 families. You ask constantly about the cost-benefit analysis. I just went to Henry H. Wells open house, and in 7th grade, every core class had 30 kids. Every parent in that class, when they heard that number, was shocked. The teachers actually seemed shocked and then tried to allay our fears that, don't worry, it's a good class. It's a good class. We're going to be able to do this. I know most of you who have kids, and I know most of you do not have a special ed kid. And when your special ed kid has a medical diagnosis and that kid does not get the services that they need because of the numbers, that's a cost-benefit analysis. I'd also wonder how many of you had kids that had math or reading or other building level services that their kid got dumped out of that program, not because they met a threshold that was, yes, you succeeded, you're doing good, and now you're at the benchmark, but because you met the threshold of, we gotta move you out because we have so many other kids in here. That's a cost-benefit analysis, and when your kid can't read or do math and can't keep up and doesn't have a reason for it, that's a really serious cost-benefit analysis. Last year, I watched the Board of Ed put forth a budget that dumped teachers and mental health support, increasing class sizes, and now we're worried about $300,000 that is going to protect the assets of the children we are supposed to serve that live in our district. That's a cost-benefit analysis. You need deterrence. Anyone that you found doesn't live here, go after them. Send them a document that you're going to pursue legal action. You set up deterrence so the next person doesn't want to get in here. And that's how you do it.
Thank you.
Yeah, answer these questions already. Has everyone who hasn't responded to a request for residency gotten a phone call yet? And when we call them, do we ask them, why aren't you bringing in these proofs of residency?
Because I would think that that would start to get the ball rolling if they haven't done it already. And if that doesn't work, maybe we should be calling every week. And if that doesn't work, we should call every day. That would start cutting down on some of this. We can't just go right from doing nothing to starting an investigation. There has to be steps to follow. And I think being persistent is the first step. And to follow up with what Eric said, it seems to me that the most sense would be to go after the people that give us absolutely no answer and who have provided no evidence of living here. I think that's a big red flag. That's the first group of people that I would start to investigate. What about when these kids get registered? I know that they do provide some kind of proof, or they did. Did we keep a copy of it? And can we start there with figuring out where they live now? That would make sense. I don't know if we have that on file. I would think we do. I'd also like to make the suggestion that if parents aren't going to provide proof of residency, then their students shouldn't be entitled to scholarships or help to pay for their field trips or AP tests or books or laptop insurance. Because I always get paperwork home that says, if you can't pay this, we have help for you. But I'm just confused as to who's actually getting that help. And if it's the people that can't prove that they live here, then that's a double whammy for me. And I also wanted to say, I think it says a lot about our district when so many people don't respond to this request. It's highly unusual to me that 600 people, or however many students we have that aren't answering, that number seems way too high and very suspicious. And I have to say that I'm terribly disappointed in our district for getting us into this situation by not having stricter residency requirements from the very start.
Thank you.
Hi, I wanted to follow up regarding my email to the board about the replacement of Mr. Carlson as the head of the re-verification program. In my opinion, Mr. Carlson has been a key player in this process and was diligent in creating databases, implementing much-needed policies and procedures, and providing information to the task force and community. It is unfortunate that he is leaving the position, but I know that his expertise is needed elsewhere in the district. I would like to ask the board to be diligent in their search to ensure that Mr. Carlson's replacement meets the appropriate qualifications to enable that the re-verification program's progress and validity continues. I ask that the Board of Ed pursue a candidate for the residency officer that has a background in accounting, auditing, processing, or data analysis. An education or administration degree is not warranted or needed for this position. The district needs the individual who will be overseeing this process to be skilled and trained to collect and translate and analyze data. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
I have a simple question. This was actually an incident. Somebody I know had rented out their house. They had a lease agreement with names on it. And when she came back, she found out from neighbors that children were going to school at her address. She showed up to verify everything. She said, this is the lease, this is my deed. I don't know how these kids are registered to go to school. Here's the bus stop, they're showing up. When she was verifying, she was asking those questions and they would not provide any information. She didn't know whether they got an affidavit because she was the owner of the home. So how are we verifying these affidavits when they had no proof? And she got mail, apartment 2, this and that, and they were using her home address with multiple. So that's a real case, and I would just like to know, how are we verifying any of that information?
I have a slightly less controversial topic. For those of you who know me, I'm purely a developmentalist, and I've talked for a number of years and tried to get something done about the change of start date for our kindergarten kids. And I noticed that this is a resolution that is not recommended. And this would put it forth, and it's one that's not being recommended. And for those of you who are not aware, there are 43 states that have either a October 1st or September 1st cutoff. There are only 7 states, New York being one of them, who has a December 1st cutoff.
And for those of you who have the history of the district going way back, we did have a pre-first grade for kids who were not developmentally ready. And it was started because our remedial reading numbers at that time were so high. And after research was done, many of those kids who were in it were late summer, early fall birthdays. So Sonia, as the delegate, and just real quick, California, the whole state of California, I think in 2014, through legislative action, created a September 1st cutoff, but they went at it by cutting back each year. In other words, they had been December 1st, then the following year they went to October 1st, and then September 1st. But because so much is being put now on universal pre-K, what California did was they have a transitional kindergarten for the parents who needed the childcare and were looking to kindergarten for childcare. For those children who were not ready age-wise, developmentally, they started a pre-K, a transitional pre-K. So I would hope that if the discussion comes up at the convention and there's any chance of discussing this, that it would be worthwhile discussing. I don't know how the rest of the board feels about it, but I certainly think it would be something. We're talking about cost-benefit analysis. If kids are properly paced, it's going to save us money over the 12 years that they're in school, not needing remedial services. Thank you.
Yes, I would like to piggyback on that. Both my sons went through the pre-first. It was very important because they were October, November babies, and they just would never have been able to do, what they did. And I do agree with Mrs. Cosma. I know the history. I remember it. God rest her soul, Mrs. D'Alessio did that class.
Mm-hmm.
It was awesome. My kids still remember it. It really was great. So if there's any way that maybe, it's very important because those kids are not mature enough. And when they start behind, they end behind. Like, it's not a case of where, okay, we'll catch them up. People used to think that. The maturity level just isn't there. So that extra year, or that year in between, or something similar, is very important, and I am all for that one. I know that one. And I also would like to say the Jason project, I think, is a great idea. I think that's wonderful. And for the residency thing, I'm positive that, I'm sure between the community and the district, we're gonna come up with something in between, to make sure that kids from Danbury are not attending school here, but not to go like crazy and all the other way. So I thought, we can get something in between on that. I am not for spending $300,000 and investigating 600 people, no. But, like we did in the past, if we know certain ones, we have, information and we investigate them, and now with the stricter, when we first register them in kindergarten, we have the stricter, registration process in place. I think something there in between might work. That's it.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? Okay, thank you. I'm going to close the comment portion. And so what we did last meeting, and we'll try to do tonight, if there's anything that we can't answer this evening, then we can address. There was some thoughts I did have on something. Hold on, let me just look back. Oh, Victor, just what are the steps in between? We don't, I'm assuming we don't jump from information to investigation.
Right, so with, again, based on the numbers that we presented in September, so we have the 193, let's take them by category. So the 193, our district registrar is following up with them to get more information. And it may just be a matter of, I just moved into the district and I haven't yet changed my driver's license over yet. So that would be resolved when the person's able to provide their driver's license. These other ones would need a private investigator, and we've already provided the private investigator with the information of these students. And those cases are being investigated right now in various degrees of surveillance or data searches. but those investigations are already underway. And we do need a residency officer to analyze that information when we get it back. And in some of these cases, or possibly many of these cases, we'll be actually proving the affirmative that they actually do live where they're claiming that they live. Again, we're just being overly conservative in our interpretation of the information and the documentation that we've received. So based on the numbers that we have now, we would put this out to a private investigator, and again, performing various degrees of investigation through data searches, utility searches, or for those matters that are more elaborate, we would need a surveillance.
Thank you for still answering the questions.
Yeah, of course.
Soon enough. And then it seems that with this other question regarding someone, saying that their address has been essentially stolen, I don't know, if someone brings in information and it checks out as far as documentation that fits our checklist, I don't know, do we need someone to tell us, hey, I just found this out myself, and inform us of it, or do we?
That would be the most helpful, and just to show how challenging this process is. You would think that homeowners are the most concrete residents to prove. That it would be very, very simple, and that you can go on a website. There is a website through Putnam County Office of Real Property Tax to look up the address and the home ownership, the homeowners of that address. I don't know how frequently it's updated, but assuming that it's updated pretty frequently. We had one instance this summer where we had a family come in to prove residency in July, and they provided a copy of their mortgage statement and their tax bill, which all checked out. A month later, we had another family come in who brought in their closing statement from the purchase of their new home, and their driver's license had the new address and all that other stuff. Those two addresses were the same. So it just goes to show how fluid residency is, and you think that a homeowner is the most stable resident.
Right.
Think of how often a lease expires and someone may leave, or if someone's in a temporary living arrangement, that they may be doubled up with a family member, and then they no longer live with that family member a month later. So it's not the process isn't 1 year we've verified everyone's residency. If this could be
it's ongoing, just because of what it is.
Right.
So it seems then, with that in mind, we'll have it entered into a system, and we'll have certain checks and balances that we can have in place. But of course, I think people coming forward to say that they've been made aware of information. Yeah.
And again, having our district registrar in place is very, very valuable, because she is the gatekeeper and she takes her job very seriously. And when we have new registrations, we make sure that the residency checks out, and we hold to that. So we have a much more strict entry process than we had before, which obviously is going to assist us in the future.
Okay, thank you. The other thing I wanted to address was the resolution. So it reads, NYSBA supports legislation that changes the date that a student is eligible to attend kindergarten to September 1st of the school year the student turns 5, with the option for a superintendent waiver if the student will be 5 before September 15th of that school year. So the issue with it was two things. One, with language, and then just people's opinions. And the language with the superintendent waiver, and the opinion was that it was too much to put on a superintendent of a school district to make a decision. They didn't like the language in that. So it may have been that if there was different language presented, a committee, or I don't know, but that was problematic for the group, as well as just pushback from people wanting it to stay the way it is. And but that was that. But yeah, if it comes up and people change the language, and perhaps school districts, make their own choices there. But
I know we used my time, but may I just ask a question on that, to Val?
Yeah.
If the state date is December 1st, and we change our date to December 1st, and we change our date to September 1st, must we then legally allow that child, if a parent comes to you and says, state says December 1st, I want my kid at school, do we have to allow them in?
which of the rules do we follow is the state. So it's what the board would pass as a policy, is what we would follow. So if the board passed the policy stating that that was a, provision, we would certainly uphold it.
But the law would override that
Right.
ultimately.
Yeah, thank you, but I'm sorry, I just
So,
needed
okay.
that clarification.
Thank you. All right,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, yeah, no, I'm sorry, we're done, Connie, thank you.
Oh, okay.
So, I don't think there was anything else in there really to address. I know there was just a lot of comments that were presented by those who spoke. Yeah, so, okay, we can move on now, I think. We do have executive session. It should be quick though, and we have a workers' comp discussion case to have. I need a motion for that, please. Diane, Carrie's a second, thank you very much. Just want to also say that we are not coming back for any action on anything we discussed. Okay? Oh, yes, a motion, I have a second, a vote please, all in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. We are adjourned, thank you.